Well, then shall start. I had some photos here, so if you want to see them, at the end there's a link to the slide so you can see all the photos if you want. I'll start the talk. I have some admin to explain first, not Django admin yet. During the talk, and this is not a joke, you might hear firecrackers, because now I'm in Catalonia and today is St. John's, well, tomorrow is St. John's Day, today's St. John's evening. So the tradition is that we have bonfires, as you can see, and we have firecrackers and fireworks. And I know that, well, we're celebrating, just I was doing a bit of homework, I knew some of these, the summer solstice, but it's 2 days late for this. And to scare witches away. I've never seen them, but maybe because of the firecrackers. And I know that different countries also celebrate a similar summer solstice event. So might be not new for you, but I thought that if things go off and I'm here talking, I'll feel a bit uncomfortable if I haven't said this before. And just to finish this bit, there are more Catalan traditions that some are not noisy, like human towers, as you can see here. Or this is the last slide of this, but eating calçots, which is a type of spring onion, and I'm here eating this. That's a way to eat them. I'm in London a few years ago, so look for that. It's very tasty. Anyway, having done the non-Django admin, what I'm going to talk about tonight. 4 years ago, we had expedition, and just a few words about the expedition. It started in Africa. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer. And then by boat, big boat, we spent a month on the sea. We went to Australia. Some scientists changed. It was about 70 scientists more or less. Many changed, some stayed. We spent another month on the sea to go to Punta Arenas in Chile. Again, some people changed, some stayed. Then we went back another month, more or less, back to Africa. And then the ship went back to Europe, and I think 10 scientists, or 8 scientists and data manager me stayed and went back to Europe by ship. So this is the expedition that I'm going to talk a little bit, and just to have some context. And I want to explain why Django was selected, or why we chose to use Django, and what was the good things that we enjoyed of Django, and how it was used, which might be different to what we would use now that I've done more Django, or what some other people might do as well. To give a bit of context, that was the big boat. It's a Russian icebreaker. It's about 130 meters, I think, length it was. And it accommodated 180 or 60 people, counting scientists and the again, the tripulation of the boat, the crew. Here's a photo at the end of the second leg. I think that we're arriving near Chile at this time. The majority of these are the scientists here. And an important thing is that the scientists every month were changing. So the system that was developed for the scientists had to be very easy to use, because they would come on board, and in 2 or 3 days, obviously, or even before, they were collecting different types of data. They were deploying different equipment, and they had to enter this in the system that they had to use. What I mean is that we didn't have a lot of time to explain and train them, sadly, on this expedition. So a bit more of context now about what I was doing at the time. I was a C++ Qt software engineer, and I took a sabbatical. All of this happened in the winter 2016-17 year. And I used to write Python for some scripts at work, and what I call evenings and weekends. And Python code dojos, side projects. I was not a Python professional developer because I was doing C++ Qt, but I was quite familiar with Python. And I had been for a very long time use of GNU Linux. And even before, and this was quite handy for all the expedition, I was a system administrator, network administrator. I'll not talk about these bits of the network and the email system on the expedition, but it took more or less half of my time while I was there. What I would like to explain is about of the data management and IT in a very generic way. So the data management and IT, we had many tasks. It was 22 science projects that were there. Each science project had between 2 and 4 people, more or less. Some were quite big and had many people working at the same time. Some were more centered on going to an island and collecting some samples from the island, going back to work, and then spend 5 more days to the next island. So it was very different rhythm for different teams. We set up the data management. So this is what the scientists were using to record what they were doing, where and why, more or less. We set up a data storage and backups. A lot of data is collected from different equipment, and obviously it cannot be lost. It's very hard to go there again, and to go there again that day is impossible. So all the effort is to not lose any data. And we work with scientists to back up data, record the metadata of what was being collected physically or recorded. And we have, and this is still being used today, a database with all of these and sample records. It was 28,000 samples were collected, and this is a way to know where it was collected, by whom, when. And on the top of these very data management topics, we were setting up an onboard network, an email system, and a file uploader. The internet was very, how to say, it could only be used, let's say, with a system designed to be used. The opening Firefox or Chrome and opening a website was not possible. Talk a little bit about this later. We had some connectivity to send files, to send emails in a system designed for this, queuing the emails, retrying, limiting the size of the emails, and all of this. And then we solved, or we helped scientists connecting equipment on board from, I have a snowflake counter, how to get the data out, to, I forgot to take the hotspot or the Wi-Fi router that I need for this equipment. Can you do something to get the data now? Or different types of issues that happened. Data management, I had to really talk about this, but to know what's collected, where, and metadata by whom. And now why, as I said, backups. All the data collected in the Antarctica, it needs to be done, it needs to be made available after a certain time. And also all this data, it was useful for the scientists who was collecting, because the scientists might be working on a project about this data, but obviously it will be useful, or it's been useful for the scientists. So it's very important to make all the data as well documented as possible to make it easy to use. And the conversation before the expedition, and be aware that data manager Jen and I were invited or contacted about a month before the expedition, or 6 weeks before. So in very kind of last minute or last month, obviously, but we had to prepare many things. But Jen knew more, or was data manager at the time and had been working on other ships, and asked me, can you build a database? Can you help me building a database? I said, well, yes, of course. And in my mind, I had at that moment, yes, I'll have a MySQL, I'll do a create table, and I'll start, I don't know, creating the tables that we need to collect the data. But then Jen said, well, we need an interface so the scientist can enter data in this database. And coming from my C++ Qt, I was, well, my tools are not the best tools for this. I can build that, but not in a few weeks before we leave, and in a way that all the scientists on board can use this easily. So here is when Django appeared. And at that time, for different reasons, I had used different tools, and I was quite familiar with Python. I had built applications with Flask. MySQL, I know MySQL well for these things. I had used SQL Alchemy, Mustache, but I was thinking, well, I need to build forms so all these scientists can open a website, authenticate, build enter certain data, select data, do some basic reports, search or something. So I was like, well, I don't know what to use. I have almost everything, but I just need something to build forms. So I was wondering, how can I do this? I asked a friend who I might not be online here now, but he said, well, use Django. That's an upgrade. I was like, no. Django is too big. I'm leaving in 4 weeks. I need to buy all this storage to save all the data. I don't want to learn a new thing now. I just don't have time. I had an impression at the time that Django was big and that I would need a lot of time to be able to do something. And then Fran, the same evening, just created a very small Django project with a small admin. I don't know if it was a contact list or a to-do list or something, one of these. Do a model at an admin and at some authentication. Oh, I thought I had one more line here. I loved it. I was like, well, this is what I need. Yes, I'm going to use this because it seems to do exactly what I wanted, and in a very easy way. I was sold by the Django admin. I was like, yeah, I'll buy this. Plus, it was Python, which I knew, which was nice. So then I went back home and I started learning Django. So I still remember my first week of Django when I was there learning the documents, the documentation. And I found that, yes, create tables with all the foreign keys and index by hand, it takes way longer, obviously, than creating Django models. And for many of these things, long time ago, before my C++ Qt job, I had done forums websites at the time with PHP, but my main problem is that I hadn't used the framework. It was 20 years ago, and I was very appreciating how Django was making things way easier, integrating, well, what I list here, authentication, permissions, admin, all of these, plus having templates with the models and security easier or harder to make mistakes, let's say, than not using a framework. So yes, I reading all the documentation, and I remember asking a few questions to Fran, but I could build something that I think makes sense. I think that there's some new people sometimes here with Django, and sometimes I explain Django to some new people or newer than me in Django, and I just want to have a word for those of you just joining the IT world now. And I know that you can do Django doing Python and nothing much, but I find that sometimes there's a long list of technologies that you might not need to know, but for debugging some issues, they become very handy. And luckily, I knew many of them. not in a very in-depth way, but they knew the concept, but had used them, some more than other ones. And sometimes I think like, oh my God, someone starting now, if needs to learn all these things, there are many layers now, and here I'm not adding SSL, Let's Encrypt, and many other issues that, not issues, but pieces of a puzzle. I just want to say that all the beginners just stay and do bit by bit like we all did. And I feel that, as I said, for debugging certain issues, sometimes it's handy to know something outside Django or how Django interacts. This is when I think that having done some web development without Django, even though it was not pleasant, it might be useful at some point. The Django application that we built, we named it Science Cruise Data Management. It's still here online. I haven't mentioned, but it was in some slide, the Swiss Polar Institute was the organizer of this expedition, now that we see the GitHub organization. And this was a 4-month expedition. So we had the application before leaving the first port, that was South Africa. And from the first moment, Django admin was used by the scientists to enter, search, update data of what happens on board. Even before leaving and over the 4 months, I did modify quite a lot of Django admin forms and extended them, added validations, and simplified how they can be used in our use case for our domain. And all that we built, it was based on this, thanks to Gen Data Manager, on a similar database structure as the ODC and BAS. So part of the tables obviously were for our use case, part of the tables and how to store metadata, it was following some standards. And before leaving port, we had a map of the ship's position and data collection locations. I think in my next slide here, I have one of the reports that were, I think is the one that was most used by the scientists to add event reports, and also this right-hand side pane for filtering for different ways. In the beginning, I didn't have all these options. I'll talk, on the top, I'll talk about this in a bit. But leaving port, we had this map and we had the cruise track updated every hour, I think, something like this. If I was enabling these show events, it would show where data or samples were collected. One of my things or lessons learned is that it's very useful to visualize any data as soon as possible. It helped a few times to see errors with latitude, longitude being on the other way around. For example, all the data collected in this area in the beginning and having some points on the other side, or points outside in the northern hemisphere, or different types of issues. So initially, data was being collected but not displayed or useful, and quite quick we started building ways to visualize and to work with this data, build reports with the data. The map, out of curiosity, was built with leaflet, and I found the the coast lines, and converted to JSON, GeoJSON lines. So for all of these, I didn't need any online connection. Another approach would have been OpenStreetMap and visualize this, but OpenStreetMap tiles don't have the projection that I needed for this case, for example. But all of this is, well, it was quite interesting. I remember spending a few evenings or days trying to put the map together that was working for the Antarctic projection. The system grew during the expedition. I was working at the time in Mendeley for was 7 years. For once in my life, I had the idea of I'm working on this and I need this soon for the scientists, or scientists needs this soon, and I need to maintain this until the end of mid-April 2017. Then this is all gone. It was kind of the opposite of what I usually think, that the code will run a long time. So at the end, I was thinking, well, this code is getting a bit hairy now. I just need 2 more weeks to end this expedition and just forget about this. As I said, initially it was for collecting data, and then we made more visualizations. All the way, we had requests from scientists that they wanted some small utilities. Some was as simple as latitude, longitude converters from different formats. Some was that yesterday I collected a sample. It was at noon yesterday, but I don't know where we were. So a system that they would put the date time, and it would give the latitude, longitude, for example, for their personal notes. Some it was some other systems that I'll say, but basically many scientists were coming with small requests, and I was building this small request in Django, and then it was available for everyone. In the 1990s, I was thinking that many of these utilities, they would come in these magazines. At least in Spain, we had these magazines with CD-ROMs when we didn't have internet, full of shareware small utilities to convert units or convert sunset and sunrises. So I was kind of building this type of things in Django. And ironically, now it's 3 years later, this system is still running for the data manager in one of the internal servers. It's not used, or scientists don't have access to this. New data is not being added in the system. I did migrate this last year when I joined the Swiss Polar Institute again, but from Django 1.8, I think, to 2, and now to 3. But yeah, it wasn't the end of the life at the end of April, as I was kind of expecting at the time. And for the last year, I've been working in 2 other Django applications, not related to this, but quite bigger applications. I've been working on them for a full year, more or less. And I would do now things different. But what it was done at that time with the resources that we had, it was fantastic. And the credit is for Django. I mean, not for me. Like, it was fantastic because Django had so many tooling that was very easy to build on all of this. After some weeks, some months, I think weeks, we're kind of building this kind of intranet that was giving some information to the scientists if they wanted to know something quick. And also we're writing some daily announcements. So here we're building these things. I took this screenshot I saw before when I was checking the slides again. At the end of the last month, here scientists could enter their the name and contact details. Basically, some scientists wanted to share emails and phone numbers. And then at the time and at the end, we're a bit more relaxed. I was thinking, well, no problem. I'll just build Facebook now. I mean, just you want to enter names, photos, and contact with other people. Here, and that was on the second month, this was not built in Django, but a bit of the same approach is like, well, we need a mail system. I set up an internal onboard mail system with external connections. It was like, well, now I'm kind of building a small Gmail. And I thought, well, if I stay more time here, I'll keep just building small things in Django. Here's one of the screenshots of utilities about sending a list of date times on UTC, and then it was sending back, as you can see here, the latitude, longitude of this place or the date and times in different formats, I think. And here more visualization. We were collecting data from different equipment. For example, here's the temperature and salinity of the water. And scientists, well, that particular equipment didn't have any display. And scientists wanted to know when we're crossing a front, for example, where water was cooler, just to take samples during this period, if this was a thing that they were interested. So Django also was very helpful to just visualize or integrate this with other JavaScript libraries in this case. At the time, I remember, well, I see that as in particular like the decimals here. I remember that I was scrolling and each data point had very long number of decimals. I just want to say that some scientists, or it was very easy because they were like, I don't mind. Don't need to format anything. This is exactly what I need. It was easier than working in some other places where everything needs to be pixel perfect. In a way, it was like, oh, they have information. They were happy with this. They didn't need to have fancy formatting or fancy graphs or anything. I like to say a few words about working almost offline. I didn't have any Stack Overflow or Google Contact for 4 months. So Django here came very handy as well. The document I downloaded, because I knew that, I downloaded the Django documentation, the offline HTMLs, and they were very useful. They were priceless there. At the time, and now I was using PyCharm, and actually reading Python documentation, Python code when the documentation doesn't clarify or answer some of my questions, it was another easy way. I think I did it more because I couldn't ask Google or Stack Overflow. So I started just digging more in Python code than probably I would have done before, which is quite interesting. You can try on a plane maybe, or for a week for fun. And I had, and this is a third point, I had in my laptop a lot of source code of projects that I've been working or that I had to check out or anything. And this was very useful. I remember that I was quite familiar at the time with the Calibre, the ebook reader code, because I had been doing a few things there. And it's a massive Python code. And I found myself that to know how to use certain functions, classes, I could just go to Calibre, grep, and learn from examples there. So it was kind of, instead of Googling things and finding examples in Stack Overflow, I was just using the things that I had in my laptop, and there was a lot of source code that I had, and I didn't even plan this. That was kind of how it was. And the Python console to play with things and the help method. And interestingly, before leaving, I downloaded I bought a few PDF books of free books, and I do read books, but usually I read them not as a reference thing. I read them nowadays more as learning about some topic. But I had some about Python, some about Django, and I found myself using the other ways. So Django documentation, Django code, and other code more than opening a book and searching in the book in that case, which is how I didn't expect this. Before leaving, I spent, I don't know, an afternoon, a few hours kind of downloading books, and then I didn't use them as much as I thought. And in retrospect, Django was a very good tool for all that we needed. Sometimes I think like, well, without Django, I don't know what would have happened, but would have, I guess, way less things in the expedition, and it would have taken more effort from me to have fewer things. And initially, before I knew Django, I thought that was big and that would get a lot on the way of my way of working or of what I wanted to do. And no, it didn't. I must say that a few times in the admin, probably my thoughts in Django design maybe didn't agree, but it was minimal compared with what I was kind of thinking. And I was happy that the admin forms were possible to adapt and change. This is probably what I would do differently now, using for a long time, 10 months. So Django crispy forms, and I would build all that I did, probably outside admin. But at the time, it was a lifesaver. And the Django commands, we did many things with Django commands. Basically, things like copy hard disks when they were connected in the server, validate data, or daily tasks. That was very useful. And I had said in some other conference in a similar talk, but the Django developers, so nice, they get an extra mile and many error messages done. It's not only an error message, but it says, and I think I have something here, it tells you a possible fix in a place. And this is useful when you're at home, and is more useful when you're offline and stressed to finish something, that it can give you hints in this type of things. And again, I've said it, but I'll say again, the Django documentation is very well written, so it's one of the parts that I appreciated the most at the time, and I still do. And I want to have a final thought. I'm not sure how I'm going with time yet. Okay, I'm finishing. The Django website said, and I had this slide done in 2017 or 2018, it still says, and I still agree, that it makes it easy to build better apps more quickly and with less code, which is completely true. But when the data manager thinks we need to build a database, yes, Django can be used to build a database, but even I know that database front end is a web app, but some people might not be using Django, and it could be using Django for some of these cases. As you think, well, I need a database. And who needs a database sometimes? I've learned after this, they think as a database, not like me, that is, I need a server with some table schemas and some front end, but I don't know the front end. What they mean is that they need a front end to enter data. And well, accidentally, yeah, there must be some server, but they don't know about this, but they think of a database as a more front end than the back end, which is usually my thoughts. So if you know of any data managers that need to build any database or other people, yeah, Django. It served us and might serve other use cases. And this was all that I had to, or I plan to explain. I don't know, Adam and Marco, if you want to do questions now, later?
Yeah, sure. We'll do questions now. Thank you very much for that talk. Nobody else can clap, but yeah, so no one's asked anything on the Q&A panel yet. If anyone wants to write there or on the chat, please do. We've got one clap emoji from Phil Barber. I would like to ask a question. You didn't quite dive into it. So what was your stack that you were using? Was it MySQL? Was that Bootstrap I spotted? Anything else?
Yeah, so it was using Bootstrap, MySQL, because I am and I was more familiar than Postgres. And that was the only reason for choosing MySQL. And I'm using now always Unicorn and Nginx. I'm happy, or I can recognize that we use the Django debug server for all the expedition because we didn't have time, and we started this way and it was working. So it was, as I said, another of the things that I have no time and I'll just use this because it seems to be working. And besides that, the server physically actually was a laptop, or it was a laptop for the first leg. It was overheating. And then in the second leg in Australia, we changed and we had a proper powerful SSD laptop. The number of concurrent users was usually quite low. It was, I think, 60 scientists, more or less. I don't think that many of them were working and hitting Django at the same time in a very intensive way. We prepared another expedition last year, and then it got postponed, not because of COVID, but because of other diplomatic reasons. And obviously, we're planning now to use Nginx, Unicorn, and a proper server on board.
And so we have another question from Thomas R. So what was the format of the data you were processing? Were you doing anything odd, or were you running a fairly standard Django setup?
Sorry, can you repeat
So the question, yes. What was the format of the data you were processing? And were you doing anything odd, or were you running a fairly standard Django setup?
So it was a very standard Django setup. Processing of data, it was very kind of low processing. We're not processing a lot of data. It was done usually after the expedition by the scientists. Some data was being processed or visualized, and all this data was coming in CSV format. So we had CSV streams. I remembered one thing now, but we had CSV streams that were visualizing like the temperature, salinity that I showed before. Some heavy data, or quite heavy data that we're processing actually, or ingesting in the database, it was the GPS position. We were feeding 1 second resolution from 2 GPSs. This was being used for the map and also to use this data when scientists were entering data saying at 11 a.m. today I deployed this net, and then it was saying where the net was deployed. And the format of the GPS that we're collecting was NMEA strings. And this is a text-based format. Again, it has a checksum, and I think that there are a few Python libraries that can process this. And I think that at the time I wrote a very simple parser for the data that I was interested, and we collected all the original data, and I think it was reprocessed after the expedition with all the checksums properly done. So yes, it was NMEA for GPS, CSV files, and the rest of data was more a matter of copying data from hard disks that scientists were bringing, or computers connected to a network into the place on the objects, not object storage, in the network storage that we had.
So we have another question from David Smith. What did you use to create the charts?
The charts?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good question. That I cannot remember now. It was, so I used a JavaScript library that someone sent me by mail because it couldn't access webs easily to download. And
the source is, it's open source, right?
It's open source, yes. I think it's D3.js. I think that from the D3.js, I had one of the multiple representations of data.
Cool. Another question from Adam Steele. What did you think Django could do better?
Oh, I was thinking of this the other day. I was expecting this question, and then I stopped thinking. Oh, I forgot what I thought. The At that time, I found that I could personalize the admin, but sometimes I wanted to go a bit further. But then, since then, I learned Django crispy forms and other tools, and I wouldn't ask Django to go further on this topic more. So yeah, I don't have now any. I mean, keep with a good documentation.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very excited with the new Django async stuff. I've used Postgres to have JSON fields. I'm very excited now to have them in MySQL and from Django. So I'm very excited with the new things. But for that 4 months, I didn't miss a thing that I can say now. Like, yeah, I wanted to have this feature.
Cool. We have a question from Paolo Melchior. Did you have problems memorizing the time data with a ship that was continuously moving between different time zones?
Yes. I think not many or not any Django daytime, and I know that changes are coming on this at some point. Not in Django, I think it was more human problem. We had the UTC time and all the science was in UTC time, and we had the ship time. And I remember 2 things very vividly. One, the first month from South Africa to Australia, I was very busy setting up all the beginnings of this, or maintaining the first weeks. And every 3 days, or every 2 days, I was losing an hour sleep because we had to, in a month, we had to change, I don't know, 10 hours or whatever. So it was kind of killing me, but we had the ship data. And then in the second month, from Australia to Chile, we went back 23 hours when we crossed the day timeline, or however it's called. So basically we lived a day again, which confused people, even me. It didn't confuse particularly Django because we're using UTC for all of this. And we built ship time to UTC utility. So when we're changing the time, we had a table with a time change, and then scientists could write, okay, it was 1 p.m. yesterday, just before lunch, what UTC time was, or what UTC daytime was. And there's a small side topic thing. I remember that day we had spaghetti and hot dogs, and I was thinking maybe they didn't plan a better meal for this day that we lived twice.
Yeah, okay. One more question in the Q&A. So from Egby Anderson, we have, after building the project and looking back on it now, what would you do differently?
Many things. There will be way more unit tests to start with, time problems, and I would build all that the scientists use outside admin. At the time, as a new Django, I didn't know better, and I had no time to learn. Now this is my kind of bread and butter of every day, and I would just use Django crispy form, outside admin, authentication, and everything. I've made the same mistake twice on how to split Django apps. So from my big application and build the small apps, somehow I was worried, or I thought when I was new in Django that was difficult to build new apps and how to interact models from different apps, which is not. But I was afraid, and I was staying with the same app that kept growing, and it was hard to navigate the models. It was hard to explain to other people when I needed to. So divide this a bit better. And I thought I had used some Django package, so some Python pip installation of some things that now I would do maybe by hand, because when I did some updates, it was a small thing, so I could have done it, but on the update time years later, it was problematic and I had to redo something. Some of these things, probably.
And are there any questions from my fellow panelists?
Yes, I have one. So first of all, thank you for the talk. It was extremely interesting. And it makes me want to join an expedition in Antarctica. And how do I do that?
I also expected this talk. This question, sorry, I expected this question. For me, it was a thing that I wanted to do for many, many years. It was a childhood dream, I have to say. I'll tell you how I did and what I would do if I wanted to go. But years ago, I had looked at the Spain ones, and as an outsider, the Spanish ships, to do this kind of job, because there's demand for this job. They are military ships, army ships. And at the time, I said, like, this put me off. I talked with scientists that have been there, and I don't think it's a problem. But when, as an outsider, I said, like, that's very strange. It's like going to the army now. The way I think to go is that if you look at the British Antarctic Survey for the UK and similar things in other countries, all of them have jobs, obviously. Some are to go to the Antarctica straight away, I think, or kind of targeting this. Some is to work in these institutions. And I've been talking, obviously, with many people in the last years since I've been there. And even a librarian who I would think a librarian at the British Antarctic Survey, why should need to go there? But they have opportunities over the years for everyone to do some work, admin work, things on in the Antarctica. So working on this in one of these institutions, I think it helps a lot. In our case, it came from the Swiss Pole Institute wanted a data manager for this expedition, and they contacted Jen, who is also my partner, asking her if she could go there only 6 weeks before, because things were prepared in very last minute. They knew that she was in a sabbatical. And then by this way, I got in touch with the people in charge and said, well, could I help there? And do you have an IT system and data collection data? And it came a bit from this, like, oh no, we need one of you as well, but we didn't think of asking or whatever. But it seems to be very much usually on working on these kind of institutions.
Can you share the link even later about the UK institution?
Yes, I'll type on the panel when I'm not sharing the screen. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for letting me present this. When I see the slides again, I almost get butterflies in my stomach again, like, oh, that was very cool.